In the early months of 1918, New Orleans, a city famous for its vibrant jazz, rich culture, and diverse communities, found itself gripped by an inexplicable terror. An unknown assailant, later named the Axeman, began a series of brutal nighttime attacks that would leave the city in a state of fear and uncertainty. This mysterious figure targeted homes across the city, leaving behind a trail of violence and unanswered questions. But who were the victims? And why does his identity remain a mystery to this day? In this video, we are going to talk about the shocking details of the case of the Axeman of New Orleans.
The city was also worried, plagued, and in fear of a figure known as the Axeman.
The nightmare started just before the morning of May 23, 1918, in a quiet part of New Orleans near Upper Line and Magnolia Streets. Joseph Maggio and his wife Catherine lived in an apartment above their family-run grocery store. Like many Italian-American immigrants in the city, they were trying to build a simple, stable life. But that night, something unthinkable happened. As they slept, someone broke into their home through a panel from the back door. Once in, the attacker went straight for the bedroom, and for the poor couple, it was the end of their story. He used a straight razor to slash both Joseph's and Catherine's throats. But the killer didn't stop there. He then picked up an axe and struck the husband's head with it, which fractured his skull. Why would he use an axe after a razor? Well, many believe the axe was used to cover up the cause of death, since the razor wounds were already fatal. This theory is up for debate, and you should comment below if you don't buy it. Back at the crime scene, everything was brutal and messy. The husband was still alive when his brothers, Jake and Andrew, found him, but he died shortly after. Catherine, on the other hand, died because she couldn't breathe as she choked on her own blood. What made things even more unsettling was that both the razor and the axe used in the attack belonged to the Maggio family. The killer didn't bring his own weapons. He used what he found inside the house. There was no sign of robbery, and nothing of value appeared to be missing. That made police question whether this was personal or something even stranger. This was the Axeman's first known strike, and it left the city rattled. No one had any idea who could have done such a thing or why, but it was only the beginning. After the shocking murder of Joseph and Catherine Maggio, it didn't take long for people to notice that something wasn't right. In the months that followed, more households across New Orleans were attacked in the dead of night. Each time, the scene looked oddly familiar. A back door forced open, often with a chisel left nearby, and an axe or straight razor, usually belonging to the victims themselves, used in the attack.
The Axeman didn't carry around his own tools. He simply would chisel his way in, usually through a back door, find whatever was handy, and go to work.
But what about the victims? Well, the victims were Italian immigrants, many of them grocers who lived with their families in small apartments behind or above their shops. Several lethal attacks that didn't target Italians were also thought to be the work of the Axeman, although this would later prove not to be the case. The attacks always seemed to happen while the families were asleep, and despite the brutal violence, nothing was ever stolen. The cash registers remained full. Jewelry and valuables were untouched. This wasn't about robbery. That much became clear. According to the press at the time, the immigrant community was absolutely terrified, with men staying up all night to protect their families. Still, the killer managed to assault 12 innocent people, out of whom only a few were lucky enough to make it out alive. One of the first people to survive an attack was Harriet Lowe, who was assaulted along with her partner, Louis Bessumer, in June 1918. Bessumer, who had been sleeping at the time of the attack, was struck in the right temple with a hatchet, while Lowe was hacked over the left ear. As with all the other assaults, he had used the victim's axe, which was found discarded in the bathroom of the apartment. While they survived the attack that night, things looked grim for them both. You see, Harriet's injuries were severe, but she became a media fascination after giving interviews from her hospital bed. In one of those interviews, she accused her partner of being a German spy. Bassumer, who was already on the police watch list, was immediately arrested. Before passing away in the hospital, she even said that he had been the one to attack her, which resulted in him being charged with murder and then serving 9 months in prison. This whole incident caused confusion among the people, as they didn't know if the Axeman had been caught or not. However, it all cleared away when the Cortimiglia family, consisting of Charles, Rosie, and 2-year-old Mary, were attacked on March 10, 1919. Both Charles and Rosie survived with severe skull fractures, but the poor child was killed with a single blow to the back of the neck while asleep in her mother's arms. As the body count rose and no arrests were made, fear spread quickly. The public and the press started asking if these murders were connected. Was this the work of a serial killer with a specific target? A hitman from the Italian Mafia? Or someone driven by hate? With no clear motive and no suspects, theories spread faster than facts, and New Orleans found itself caught in a growing sense of panic. Families who once slept with open windows now locked themselves inside. People started keeping weapons within arm's reach, from pistols under pillows to axes by the bed. Some even rigged makeshift traps at their back doors, terrified the killer would return in the night. Immigrants, particularly Italians, found themselves at the center of suspicion, both as victims and as possible suspects. The fact that many victims were Italian grocers sparked rumors of Mafia involvement. Others whispered about voodoo curses or demonic possession, leaning into the city's long history of supernatural folklore. There were also those who believed the killer was simply insane, a madman with no motive except violence. None of it made people feel safer. The local press only fueled the panic. Headlines grew bolder and more sensational, often exaggerating details or speculating wildly. That's when the name the Axeman stuck. It was catchy, terrifying, and vague enough to become its own kind of legend. According to the New Orleans superintendent of police at the time, Frank Mooney, the murderer was a murderous degenerate who gloats over blood. While the police promised to catch the person responsible, trust in them was fading. They had made no arrests. They had no solid leads, just a pattern which ended up with blood-stained bedrooms, broken doors, and growing paranoia. The Axeman wasn't just killing people, he was haunting an entire city. Now, just when the police had lost hope about finding the real identity of this psychopath, on March 13, 1919, the Times-Picayune published a letter that sent the entire city of New Orleans into a deeper state of panic, as the Axeman himself supposedly wrote it. The writer claimed to be a spirit from hell and mocked the police for their failure to catch him. But what really made people freeze was his threat. He wrote that at 12:15 a.m. on the night of March 19th, he would pass over the city and kill again, unless, he said, every household played jazz music. The letter read, "They have never caught me, and they never will. I am not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call the Axeman. Undoubtedly, you Orleanians think of me as a most horrible murderer, which I am. At will, I could slay thousands of your best citizens, for I am in close relationship with the angel of death," he added. He ended the letter saying, "I have been, am, and will be the worst spirit that ever existed, either in fact or realm of fantasy." You might think that this would be the work of a writer or a poet trying to be dramatic, and the people at that time shared this thought. They weren't sure if the letter was a hoax or an actual warning. However, they weren't willing to take their chances, as the city had already seen too much. In the days leading up to March 19th, fear turned into strange excitement. Musicians were hired at the last minute, record players were dusted off, and jazz bands played non-stop in dance halls and bars. That night, it didn't feel like this was a city flowing with blood. Even homes that had never played a note of jazz before made sure to join in. The atmosphere was eerie, with people dancing everywhere. Still, their eyes were fixed on one thing: the clock. They waited for the time given by the Axeman, hoping that they hadn't angered him. As the hours passed, the people grew more relaxed. No one had been attacked. But instead of celebrating, the people started questioning whether it was just a psychological trick, a prank, or did they actually avoided the attacks by following the instructions. Was the killer finally satisfied? Sadly, no. In August 1919, the Axeman struck for what would be the final time. The victim was Mike Pepitone, a father of 6 and the manager of a local grocery store. Just like many others before him, he was attacked in the middle of the night. His wife woke up after hearing the noise and rushed into the room, only to find him lying in a pool of blood. The scene was gruesome. His head had been smashed repeatedly with an axe. Blood covered the walls and furniture. Every time he turned his head, blood came from his head and face, Esther Pepitone said. It simply poured over the bed. There was no sign of forced entry apart from the now familiar damage to the back door. Once again, the weapon belonged to the victim. The pattern fit the alias of the Axeman. Mrs. Pepitone didn't see the killer, only a blur escaping into the night. But her statement confirmed what many had already feared. Whoever had been behind these attacks had returned after months of silence. And then, just as suddenly as the killings had started, they stopped. No more murders, no more strange letters, no confessions or arrests. The Axeman simply vanished. This was his last dance. Over the years, dozens of suspects were considered, but no one was ever charged with the Axeman murders. Some people believed the killer was a sadistic madman acting alone, while others saw signs of a larger conspiracy. One early suspect was Joseph Maggio, a known criminal with ties to extortion and the Italian underworld. By day, he was a pharmacist, but by night, he was someone much sinister. In 1907, he had been arrested for using dynamite to blow up an Italian grocery store. But it wasn't entirely out of hate. He was extorting money from the owner. Interestingly enough, his death connects to the murders, as the last person he ever saw was the wife of the Axeman's final victim, Esther Pepitone. She had started a new life and was going by the name Esther Albano. As luck would have it, her second husband went missing, and she felt Maggio was connected to the case. So she approached the man and asked him if he knew anything about it, to which he said that he was being held for some of his money. On December 5th, 1921, he knocked on her door and demanded $500 and her jewelry. While talking to the police, she said, he stated that if I did not give him the home, he would kill me the same way he had killed my husband. The husband in question was the Axeman's final victim. Instead of handing over her possessions, she got a revolver and shot Maggio several times till he stopped moving. Interestingly enough, the murders stopped as soon as he went away. Does this mean that the reign of the Axeman was over? Well, some newspapers jumped on this, speculating that Maggio was the Axeman. But police couldn't link him to the other murders, and there was no real evidence to prove it. Some thought the killer might have been mentally ill, or even driven by occult beliefs. The strange tone of the infamous letter, calling himself a demon who loved jazz, led some to imagine the Axeman as someone delusional, or maybe someone trying to create fear for his own twisted pleasure. Others argued the Axeman wasn't just one person. Maybe multiple attackers were copying the original crimes, or maybe the press exaggerated the connections between unrelated murders. But the patterns, entry through the back, use of the victim's axe, the timing, were too consistent to ignore. In the end, no theory fully explained everything. The Axeman remains one of America's most mysterious killers, his identity unknown, his motives still a subject of debate more than a century later.
And no closure to the case was brought. It sort of receded back into yet another New Orleans legend.
What would you do if you were in their situation? Do you have any theories? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to leave a like and check out the next video. We'll catch you next time with another video.